Robert Plant lost $800 million as a result of his decision in 1980. Fans are still unaware of the true reason he turned down the largest contract in music history. However, that choice was only the start of a secret-filled life. A prohibited liaison with the sister of his ex-wife. He hardly mentions his son. Additionally, he has a history of losing everyone he has ever loved. At 77, she lives alone and has memories that are too difficult to talk about. Not everything in the rock legend's life right now is depressing. It's nearly unreal. Growing up, Robert Plant experienced a world that was both stable and unpredictable. Robert C. Plant, his father, was a licensed civil engineer who had experience with significant projects, such as constructing runways during World War II. Despite their desire for middle-class luxury, the family was not fully settled in West Bromwich. His mother, Annie Celia Kane, who was of Romani ancestry, was the source of the actual conflict. Plant's ancestry instilled in him a feeling of mysticism, mythology, and the spirit of the nomad. It was quite different from his father's neat world of plans and buildings. Life felt harsh and gray in the Black Country, so called because of the smoke and soot that hung in the air from heavy industry. His mother's heritage gave him access to a vibrant and imaginative universe that subsequently influenced his mythological and magical songs. One of the most defining struggles of his early years was growing up torn between the two cultures. The conflict with his parents became more difficult to overlook as he grew older. His father wanted him to take a safe route and become a chartered accountant, which was the pinnacle of respectability in post-war Britain. The thought of his son abandoning this ideal was extremely disheartening for Robert C. Plant, who had put forth a lot of effort to get through the ranks. However, Robert had already discovered something else that took up all of his time. Through musicians like Sonny Boy Williamson II, Howlin', and Muddy Waters, he had come to appreciate the blues' unadulterated strength and emotional honesty. Despite having grown up far from the world it depicted, the music spoke of anguish and longing in ways that he felt deep inside. He locked himself in his room and studied every sound, spending his allowance on rare imported records from a store called the Diskery in Birmingham. It was more than simply music to him, it was a way of life that disapproved of the peaceful, secure life his parents had cherished. He was enrolled in King Edward VI Grammar School in Stourbridge by the time he was 16. This was a wonderful accomplishment, a springboard to college, and a promising future for his family. However, Robert felt confined. The magnetic draw of the blues overshadowed the meaninglessness of the disciplines he was compelled to study, such as Latin and mathematics. He described himself as a square peg in a round hole. He made the audacious choice to drop out of school at the age of 16, having barely received a few GCE level passes. It wasn't only an error in the eyes of his parents, but a total betrayal of all their hard-won gains. It was the only path forward for him. He wasn't simply dropping out of school. The life they had planned for him was coming to an end. The domestic tension quickly escalated to a breaking point. Robert departed permanently at the age of 16. It was a challenging and uncertain period rather than a spectacular journey. He lived the kind of nomadic lifestyle he had once admired in the bluesmen he adored, sleeping on the floors of friends' houses and moving about a lot since he had no money and nowhere to go. He received both financial and emotional assistance from his significantly older girlfriend, Maureen Wilson. Together, they eventually located a modest apartment in Walsall, where she kept him afloat while he pursued what seemed to be an unattainable ambition. He didn't talk much to his parents between 1964 and 1966. He embarked on arduous physical labor tasks to make ends meet, the most taxing of which was pouring tarmac for the West Midlands construction business Wimpy. He developed the grit that would eventually be heard in his voice as a result of the physical grind. Even with these demanding responsibilities, he spent his evenings listening to music. His first taste of popularity came when he joined a group in 1966. Known as the Band of Joy, it quickly rose to fame in Birmingham and the Black Country. John Bonham was the band's drummer, and his strong drumming complemented Robert's wild, soaring vocals in an electrifying way. They made a sound together that suggested something much greater. Robert, on stage. The Black Country dubbed him the Wild Man of Blues because of his dramatic demeanor and long blonde hair. Robert distinguished out as someone special, and the Band of Joy developed a sizable local fan base. Nevertheless, despite their efforts, the band never signed a record deal and earned very little money. They frequently received little more than beer money for playing in crowded bars and clubs. It was a period of development, but also intense annoyance. The summer of 1968 brought about a complete transformation. The Yardbirds' outstanding guitarist, Jimmy Page, was in a difficult situation. His band had just broken up in July, so he had roughly $30,000 in tour deals in the US and Scandinavia. He ran the possibility of financial ruin if he couldn't locate a new organization fast. After Terry Reid, his original pick for a singer, rejected him, Reid suggested Robert Plant. Robert was only 20 years old at the time and was barely making ends meet with $20 per week. Meeting him wasn't casual for Page. He was looking desperately for someone who could save him from obscurity and bankruptcy. Page traveled 120 miles from London on July 31, 1968, to attend Robert's performance with the obscure band Hobbs Tweedle at a teacher training college in Birmingham. He was astounded by Robert's performance that evening. With a 4-octave voice and a presence that Page had never witnessed before, he sang blues standards and Somebody to Love by Jefferson Airplane. On stage, Robert seemed to exude an odd, almost supernatural energy. Page later acknowledged that he believed there must be a personal issue with him because he would have already been signed by a major band. In actuality, Robert was turned down by London bands because they thought he was too heavy or unusual for the general public. Page knew he had discovered someone exceptional that evening. Robert paid Page a visit at his Victorian boathouse in Pangbourne the very next day. The atmosphere for what ended up being an all-night session was created by the house's abundance of Eastern art, medieval tapestries, and esoteric literature. Robert had brought over rare American blues records that matched Page's personal collection, including the full discography of Robert Johnson and recordings by Skip James. They exchanged thoughts and songs until 4 in the morning. They sang Baby, I'm Gonna Leave You at one point, and Robert's voice resonated so loudly that the house's wooden timbers appeared to tremble. They had drawn out the beginnings of songs that would go on to make millions of dollars, such as Communication Breakdown and Dazed and Confused, before daybreak. Now that Robert was on board, Page focused on finishing the band. John Bonham, who was then making $40 per week with Tim Rose's group, was recommended by Robert. Because of how powerful his drumming was, Bonham was barred from various locations for using his bass drum to break down walls. In exchange for his tryout, Page paid him $25, which was almost twice his current salary. And it was successful. John Paul Jones, a session musician who has played with the Rolling Stones and Donovan, joined them to round out the group. Jones was a multi-instrumentalist who had attended the Royal College of Music. As a session musician, he earned more money by 1967 than many full-time rock artists. This new group had formed in just 3 weeks, with each member contributing unique talent but making less than $150 per week overall. They were prepared to take off in September of 1968. Chris Dresch, a former bassist for the Yardbirds, threatened to sue them, so they changed their original name to the New Yardbirds. The Who's Keith Moon and John Entwistle joked that Page's new band would fail like a lead balloon, which is how the new moniker came to be. Page changed the spelling to Led Zeppelin because he loved the phrase. It, in his opinion, encapsulated the band's ideal blend of strength and beauty, heaviness and flight. In 1969, Led Zeppelin's debut album did more than merely make it into the charts. It made a huge impact and permanently altered rock music. The band was outselling well-known performers and establishing the sound that would come to characterize heavy metal within months of its formation. Jimmy Page discovered Robert Plant by happenstance when he heard him perform Somebody to Love at a Birmingham college. He immediately recognized the uniqueness of Plant's voice. Plant's high notes, guttural growls, and visceral wails on that debut album gave the music a strength that had never been heard before. It served as the impetus for such bands like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Black Sabbath. Led Zeppelin had already been anointed the new rock giants, and the course of music had been permanently altered before they had even completed their first global tour. Robert Plant was at the heart of this ascent. Fans were unable to forget the impression he left on stage. He gained notoriety as the Golden God because of his tall, self-assured posture and long, blonde hair that fell over his naked chest. He did more than just sing. Every performance was made unique by his energetic movements, which included snapping his fingers, throwing back his head, and striking daring positions. His appearance came to represent rock in general. He even received the unique title of Chestorama from a music magazine in 1974, which declared that he had the greatest chest in rock. Later, Plant joked about it and said he was honored, but he wasn't sure how to describe his own chest. His flashy jewelry, tight jeans, and vibrant shirts only enhanced the picture. Numerous other frontmen, including Mick Jagger and Jim Morrison, were affected by the look he developed and contributed to the definition of rock stardom. Led Zeppelin IV, which was released in 1971 and went on to sell over 37 million copies worldwide, was the album that cemented their position in history and became one of the best-selling albums ever. Its focal point was the song Stairway to Heaven, which was over 8 minutes lengthy yet still became one of the most well-known songs in rock history. Fans purchased the entire album only to hear it, despite the band's refusal to release it as a single. It sold over 24 million copies in the US alone, earning it a 24-time platinum certification. The figure surpassed 38 million worldwide. Plant's personal life was evolving concurrently with their growing notoriety. He wed Maureen Wilson on November 9, 1968. In what may have been the most exclusive performance debut ever, the freshly formed Led Zeppelin performed at their wedding celebration, which took place in London's Roundhouse. When Plant's career took off from local clubs to global fame, Maureen, whom he had met at a Georgie George concert in 1966, became a mainstay in his life. On their second album, he even composed the song Thank You specifically for her. They had 3 kids together, and while Plant was on tour, Maureen kept things stable at home. Their marriage provided Plant with a unique feeling of normalcy during those formative years amidst the turmoil of rock stardom. However, there were some scandals in the road life. The so-called Mud Shark incident happened at Seattle's Edgewater Inn in July 1969. Members of Led Zeppelin and Vanilla Fudge were involved in a startling experience with a 17-year-old groupie and a fish that was retrieved from the bay, according to Carmine Apis of Vanilla Fudge, who later verified this in his memoir. When Frank Zappa recounted the tale in a 1971 live album, it attracted greater attention. It was written off as a myth for years, but the subsequent proof solidified it as one of the most bizarre tales in rock history. The incident was particularly shocking because it took place during Zeppelin's first significant US tour, when the band was still working to build a solid reputation. Over time, Plant's personal opinions on the excesses of the rock lifestyle changed. By 1975, he was troubled by the burgeoning Los Angeles groupie scene, particularly the way it was attracting younger and younger ladies. In the song Sick Again, he wrote about this, where he vented his rage and melancholy. He expressed his disenchantment with the atmosphere in interviews, claiming that what had been thrilling now felt flimsy and incorrect. He publicly referred to the rock star lifestyle as mean-spirited and shabby by the mid-1980s, demonstrating his distance from the excess that typified much of Zeppelin's persona. Additionally, Plant gave Led Zeppelin songs a depth that many didn't anticipate. He used his passion for mythology and literature into his songs, frequently referencing Norse myths and J.R.R. Tolkien's writings. Mordor was mentioned in songs like Ramblin', and Tolkien's universe was a major inspiration for the Battle of Evermore, which featured visuals that fans could immediately relate to characters like Frodo and Galadriel. Additionally, he referenced Norse myths in songs like Immigrant Song, when he sung of Valhalla and Viking conquests. Because of this, Zeppelin's music has a depth and intricacy that distinguishes them from other bands. When the band performed in Madison Square Garden in 1973, they encountered one of the greatest mysteries in rock history. From 1:20 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. about $200,000 in cash was taken from the Drake Hotel's safe deposit box on July 29. Their earnings from the concerts were represented by the money. When Richard Cole, the tour manager, went to pay the film crew, he found just passports in the box and realized the crime had occurred. The money was never recovered, and no one was apprehended, even after a thorough NYPD investigation and thorough report. One of the most well-known thefts in rock history is still this one. Additionally, it was mentioned in The Song Remains the Same, the band's concert film. Another significant turning point was Plant's development as a songwriter. His lyrics were frequently criticized in the beginning for being repetitious and simplistic. However, by 1970, when Led Zeppelin III was released, he had begun penning more introspective and intimate songs. Songs like That's the Way, Brawny, and Stomp revealed a different side of him that was rich in emotional depth and narrative. With Jimmy Page's support, Plant became more self-assured and created a style that blended mythological ideas with introspection. Then, on August 4, 1975, a terrible disaster occurred in Rhodes. Plant lost control of his family's vehicle while they were on vacation. He had fractures to his ankle and elbow in the collision, while Maureen sustained severe injuries, including a cracked head. Thankfully, their kids only suffered minor bruising. Thought Maureen wouldn't make it, but she did, thanks to the band's resources and prompt medical attention. Memory issues were among the long-term harm that Plant suffered. Everything altered because of his injuries. He was in a wheelchair for months, and it took him 2 years to fully recover. Led Zeppelin was forced to postpone a big 33-date North American tour during that time, which included performances in Pasadena's Rose Bowl, Oakland, Kansas City, and Atlanta. Fans were devastated by the cancellations, which also cost the band millions of dollars. Plant had to get used to recording while tied to a chair, which was much more agonizing. Zeppelin had made a triumphant comeback to the US by 1977. After Plant's Sirius Automobile, their first in 2 years. After eagerly awaiting the announcement, 51 performances were scheduled in major American cities. With 15,000 to 20,000 seats apiece, Madison Square Garden and Chicago Stadium sold out in a hurry, and the tour's advance sales exceeded $5 million. While the band was playing in front of 76,000 fans at the Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans on July 23, 1977, Plant got a call that would forever alter his life. Maureen, his wife, called from England to inform him that their 5-year-old son, Karak, had become gravely ill. She reported that he was experiencing scary weakness, a fever that had risen to 104 degrees, and severe vomiting. Plant was 4,000 miles distant. The second call came to Plant on July 26, 3 days later. An uncommon viral infection that killed Karak within 48 hours was the cause of his death. Plant just missed the opportunity to see his son alive by a few hours since he had intended to take a plane home that same day. According to witnesses, he passed out and cried out in agony, causing the hotel hallway to reverberate. Over 800,000 ticket buyers were disappointed when the band abruptly canceled the 27 remaining tour dates, forfeiting around $4 million. Bandmates and crew made sure he at least ate and drank water as he stayed in his hotel room for 6 days, refusing to leave. He informed manager Peter Grant that he didn't think he could ever perform again, threw thousands of dollars worth of wine down the drain, and refused to take any medications. The tragedy was made even more painful by their insurance company's attempt to reject a $2.3 million claim, claiming that family sorrow was not covered. Plant lost over 30 pounds and was not seen by anybody save his immediate family and a few acquaintances throughout the next year and a half, which he lived in near complete isolation on his Worcestershire farm. Only John Bonham's encouragement prevented him from quitting music entirely. Before Bonham intervened, Plant subsequently said that he was prepared to give up entirely and might even pursue a career as a teacher. In order to establish a secure and reassuring routine for Plant, Bonham even went so far as to use his own 6-door Mercedes limousine, complete with a driver's cap. He and his spouse, Pat, provided the Plant family with assistance that went beyond friendship by living close by. I think Led Zeppelin would have disbanded in 1977 rather than 3 years later if it weren't for him. Plant was utterly transformed by the catastrophe. With his wild stage appearance and fantastical lyrics, the guy who had been regarded as the golden god of rock had lost interest in dream worlds and rock star swagger. He desired genuineness. Almost immediately, he quit taking drugs and instead concentrated on his loved ones' actual circumstances. Later, he said that he questioned the value of his existence and what it meant to be a husband and parent instead of a performer for a large portion of that period. All My Love, one of the most poignant rock songs ever, was born out of his sorrow. Plant composed it as an outright homage to Karak, describing it as a means of honoring the happiness his kid had brought to him and his family. He was unable to play back the unadulterated feeling more than once, therefore he only captured the vocals on one recording.
With no help from Jimmy Page, the song was composed entirely on John Paul Jones' Yamaha GX1 synthesizer and was unlike anything Zeppelin had ever done.
It was very personal for Plant because it was one of just 2 Zeppelin songs that Page did not co-write. It was one of the band's best moments, he subsequently said. The change was evident when the band recorded outside in Stockholm towards the end of 1978. Because of their addictions, Jimmy Page and John Bonham were frequently absent, so Plant and Jones had to do the most of the composition. The entire record, which rose to the top of the Billboard 200 and remained there for weeks, was influenced by Plant's new outlook. John Bonham's drinking had gotten to the point that it was hard to conceal by 1980. The warning indicators were evident during Led Zeppelin's June and July European tour that year. He passed out in the middle of the third song at a concert in Nuremberg. The press soon identified alcohol as the true cause, despite the band's explanation that he had just overeaten. He had to be rushed to the hospital because the situation was so bad. Later, Rolling Stone revealed that he was receiving medicine for both depression and anxiety and had just recovered from a heroin addiction. It was a dangerous combination, especially when combined with his regular drinking. Nobody was able to stop him, even though those close to him could see he was on the verge. He started what would turn out to be the most dreadful day of his life on September 24, 1980. He was picked up by Led Zeppelin associate Rex King and sent to Bray Studios for rehearsals. Bonham requested to pause for breakfast en route. He consumed 4 quadruple vodka screwdrivers during that one lunch. That equated to 400 to 560 milliliters of pure alcohol, or 16 shots of vodka, before midday. Later on, Robert Plant recalled Bonham saying, "I'm tired of playing the drums. Everyone plays better than me." In an odd, almost prescient moment, Bonham even said to Plant, "You play the drums and I'll sing when we get to the rehearsal," before ripping off the sun visor from his car and hurling it out the window. He never gave his body a rest at the studio, drinking excessively all afternoon and into the night. On September 25, the following day, there was heartbreaking news. John Paul Jones and Benji Lefevre, the road manager, discovered him dead at Jimmy Page's Windsor residence at approximately 1:45 in the afternoon. Clewer's Old Mill House. A staff member had laid him on his side to help maintain a clean airway when he went to bed approximately 13 hours prior. It was disclosed during the inquest 1 month later that he had ingested between 1.0 and 1.4 liters of alcohol, or around 40 shots of vodka, in a 24-hour period. The coroner declared that the amount of alcohol in his blood, which was 276 milligrams per 100 milliliters, was incompatible with life. The alcohol had weakened his body's responses, causing him to choke while he slept. No narcotics were detected in his system. He left his wife and 2 kids behind at the young age of 32. His passing immediately ended Led Zeppelin. On December 4, 1980, 70 days later, the band formally declared they would not continue without him. Out of respect for Bonham and his family, the remaining members, John Paul Jones, Jimmy Page, and Robert Plant, explained that they were unable to continue. In rock history, they made an uncommon option. To get back together, the band turned down huge offers. They once declined a U.S. tour offer of $90 million apiece. Years later, there were even reports that Richard Branson had made an offer of $800 million. They abruptly canceled their scheduled North American tour, which was supposed to start in Montreal on October 17. All of a sudden, the period that characterized rock music for over 10 years was finished. The void left by Bonham's passing at age 32 seemed insurmountable to Robert Plant. Phil Collins took over at that point. Collins, who was now gaining popularity as a solo artist, told Plant, "My hero was the guy who sat behind you all those years." He even accompanied Plant on his 1983 tour and contributed drumming to 5 of the 8 tracks on his debut solo album, Pictures at 11. Plant later claimed that Collins offered him the support and encouragement he needed to stand on his own 2 feet again, rather than a lot of advice. Released on July 2 in the UK and June 25 in the US, Pictures at 11 demonstrated that Plant could be successful without Zeppelin. It achieved gold in Australia, platinum in the US and Canada, and number 2 in the UK and number 5 on the US Billboard 200. The album received positive reviews from critics, with Rolling Stone highlighting Plant's ability to transform modest goals into a significant occasion. Before Led Zeppelin's Swan Song label closed, it was the only solo album he had ever published. Big Log was his first solo hit the following year. The song rose to number 6 on the Billboard Top Tracks chart and number 20 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and number 11 in the UK. Its backstory was peculiar. The musicians at Rockfield Studios ran out of firewood while tinkering with a TR-808 drum machine. Without any equipment, they located a 15-foot log and burnt one end slowly until it was hollow. The song's enigmatic title was inspired by that peculiar situation. Its music video, which was directed by Storm Thorgerson, helped solidify Plant's new image with eerie views taken throughout California and Nevada, including Death Valley and Las Vegas. Plant's personal life was falling apart, but his profession was flourishing. In 1968, he married Maureen Wilson, but their marriage dissolved in 1983. Through his ascent to stardom, the death of his 5-year-old son, Karak, in 1977, and the dissolution of Led Zeppelin in 1980, she had stayed at his side. However, Plant's solo career's demands, which included frequent touring, proved to be too much. She briefly dated Ian Hatton, a guitarist in Jason Bonham's band in the early 1990s, following the divorce. Many people think that no one ever took Maureen's place in Plant's heart, even after their years apart and his subsequent kid with a different lady. Plant's greatest solo success was his 1988 album, Now and Zen. It sold 3.1 million copies worldwide after its February 29 release, peaking at number 6 in the United States and number 10 in the United Kingdom. By 2001, the album had earned a triple platinum certification in the United States. Heaven Knows and Tall Cool One, the latter of which sampled iconic Led Zeppelin riffs, both featured Jimmy Page. He accomplished what many said was impossible by fusing his new sound with his history, flourishing outside of Zeppelin. Plant and Shirley Wilson, his ex-wife Maureen's sister, welcomed their fourth child, Jessie Lee, in 1991. Fans were taken aback by this peculiar familial circumstance, which made news. For Plant, the birth followed years of heartbreak at the death of his son, Karak. Fans only know a few information about Jessie Lee, who is 34 years old and has decided to lead a secluded existence. After collaborating with American folk singer Patty Griffin in the band Joy, Plant started dating her in 2010. They divided their time between Texas and England for a number of years, but the cultural disparities were too great. Acknowledged that when they broke up in 2014, he felt remorse and sadness. His 2007 collaboration with Alison Krauss on the album Raising Sand was one of his most well-known endeavors. The record defied all expectations by earning all 5 of its Grammy nominations in 2009. Such as Record of the Year and Album of the Year. It was a surprising victory that demonstrated that decades after Led Zeppelin, Plant's music could still transcend boundaries. At the age of 77, Plant and his partner Don Anglin lead a more tranquil life. They spend time in Worcestershire, supporting neighborhood events and going to local football games. He is now a patron of a homeless organization in the area. And continues to travel with saving grace. A large portion of his estimated $200 million net worth comes from Led Zeppelin's catalog, which still brings in $8 to $12 million annually. He maintains a modest lifestyle, staying true to his musical roots despite his wealth.